Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is your 2-minute management lesson. Today we're going to talk about perception, and everything we do is really related to our perception. See, our brains tell us what to do, and then we take those actions, and as you've probably heard me say before, it's not what happens to us, it's what we choose to do with what happens to us that matters most. And so, if we perceive things to be a bad thing, we may act in a negative way and get a negative outcome. And if we see things to be a positive thing, we may take positive actions and get positive outcomes. And yes, I know I'm simplifying that aspect, but take this very famous story about a man that goes into a coffee shop, buys a bag of tiny donuts, sits down, and then starts reading the newspaper. Well, shortly after he starts reading the newspaper, he looks up and there's a homeless man sitting on the other end of the table. And the homeless man nods at him and reaches into the bag and grabs a donut and puts it in his mouth. Well, the man looks a little frustrated at the man sitting across the table from him, and he reaches over and grabs a donut and takes a bite and starts reading the newspaper thinking, gosh, I can't believe this homeless guy is eating my donut. And then he happens to glance again and he sees the man reaching into the bag one more time, and this homeless guy eats another donut. And the guy's like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? In his own mind, he doesn't say anything out loud. And so he reaches and grabs another donut himself and eats it and continues to read the newspaper, just really bothered by what he's seeing. Well, a second later, this homeless man reaches over and grabs the last donut, looks up at the man, and he breaks the donut in half, hands the other half of the donut to the man who was reading the newspaper, and puts the other half of the donut in his mouth and walks off. And the man sitting at the end of the table is like, what just happened there? That is so weird. Says, well, I better get to work. So he puts his newspaper away, puts his coat in his arm that was sitting on a bench that he was sitting next to, and he sees that his coat actually was covering up the bag of donuts that he purchased. This homeless guy was sharing his donuts with the man reading the newspaper. And so here the man reading the newspaper was starting to get all frustrated because he had the wrong perception of things that went on. And sometimes when we have a negative bias against certain people, it shapes our perception on what we believe is taking place. And so as managers, it really is important to understand that our perception may not be the actual reality. And I like to use the word paradigm. Stay in a conversation longer and ask things in a kind and gentle way so we don't end up putting our foot in our mouth, so to speak. Anyway, that's your 2-minute management lesson on perception. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt from Pierce College.